I want to ask you about the Orleans depth chart here. So Tucker does a great job. He's our depth chart guru, but this is college, and we could use all the help that we can get. So, taking a look at the depth chart on offense, do you see anything that's completely out of whack?
No. I mean, you could kind of go back and forth about some of the receiver depth, but there are 5 or so guys who could like it. So the top 4 is Field stays on, Greathouse, Pauling. That's pretty set in
Okay.
stone. You have the starters right, I think.
Okay.
Then the other 5 guys in those second and third string spots, anyone's guess
Oh,
who
sure.
the
Yeah.
5th and 6th guys, but that's obviously not something to be super concerned
No.
about. Offensive line looks good.
Okay.
Tight end looks good. I don't know if you can put an or there at quarterback, but that
Yeah.
Carr is, I guess, start as well.
Okay.
Defense, I would put Traore over Tui Halmak at Viper. I think Traore, when we get into potential breakout players, he's a big one for me. Defensive tackle, you could go either way. A lot of competition at linebacker and safety, but Traore over Tui Halmak is
That's the big one.
Is the big one. Like there are plenty of competitions like defensive end, will linebacker, free defensive end, will linebacker, and free safety are the ones where it's like, could very well be the guy you have, could very well be the guy behind him.
Okay.
Tackle too, but nothing I would rush to change at the moment.
Excellent. So it looks like Tucker did his usual stand-up job.
For sure.
All right. Now, let's start, first of all, with transfers. And because you were talking, and by the way, you were talking about the offensive line, and I noticed that just taking a look at the guys that have left the program, the major losses were along the offensive line. Spindler, Coogan, and Pendleton are gone. So let's start off with that. Notre Dame obviously must have a tremendous offensive line, and they have for years, that they could lose 3 guys like that and still be really solid. And I guess that's why there's 3 guys left, because, who knows if they would have been starters, I guess. Maybe they would have. I don't know. Maybe they got more money, whatever. But did they, any of those losses could be called significant?
For depth, sure. For depth, absolutely. Pat Coogan and Rocco Spindler did a tremendous job at center and right guard last season. They actually got benched at the start of the season. They lost jobs in fall camp. A couple guys get hurt. They step back in. They play really well. They play really well, and they start the national championship game. But yeah, they left because they probably would not have had starting jobs in 2025. That's how good their younger guys on the offensive line are projected to be. So yeah, they obviously went to quality Big Ten programs. Pendleton to Tennessee, of course. He started week 1, but no, I mean I don't think they would have started this year. That like Spindler and Coogan might have had a shot, but I think Craig, Jagasaw, Shrouth beat them out because I mean they love those young guys in the offensive line. I personally think this is going to be Freeman's best offensive line at Notre Dame, and I think Marcus Freeman would agree. And so that's why those guys left.
Okay. Were there any other major losses? It doesn't really look like it.
Yeah, and Jelly, and Jelly is what it is. Like
Quarterback.
He lost out on a competition. Urlacher was a surprise. Is of course Brian Urlacher's son. He played in garbage time and on special teams a little bit as a freshman last year. Looked really good. But they have a ton of good young safeties in the pipeline to the point where losing him isn't the end of the world.
Okay. All right. Now let's take a look at the incoming transfers, and let's see if I can get that here. I got so many browsers open. Here we go. All right. So Fields from Virginia is obviously a big one because of his production over the last couple of years. I think he had over 1,600 yards, I think he had 113 receptions, 10 touchdowns, averaged about 14 per. So he's a big addition. And they also get Pauling, and you mentioned him as we were going over the depth chart. And that was something last year where Notre Dame didn't necessarily have a lot of depth at wide receiver, but was this really part of that? Was that they really figured we've got to load up a little bit more at wide receiver?
Yeah, so last year they brought in 3 transfers at wide receiver. It was Bo Collins, who was like a 400 to 500 yard per season guy at Clemson. That's pretty much who he was at Notre Dame. Like, he was a good, probably not great, boundary receiver. Like, very much an upgrade from what they had before, but definitely left some things to be desired. Chris Mitchell, who was a Florida international transfer, was a really good deep threat at FIU. That didn't translate to Notre Dame. And then Jaden Harrison, who was primarily a kickoff returner, and obviously you saw the results of that in the Sugar Bowl against Georgia, but was always going to be a depth receiver. Fields and Pauling are much more proven than any of those 3 guys were, as just proven veteran receiver options that Carr or Minchie, whoever starts at quarterback, is going to be able to trust. I think Fields is a big upgrade on the boundary. Pauling, I lean towards saying won't start, but he's going to play a ton, both in the slot and outside. Like, he's a underneath security blanket kind of guy. And even a guy who, like, you hear people talk about him, like, he's the kind of guy who will elevate a receiver room even if and when he's not producing, because he's someone who's going to, his work habits, kind of rub off on everyone else. That kind of guy. Fields was not here in the spring. He was, graduating from Virginia. He arrived in the summer, and I think he's going to be a really good boundary option for them.
Yeah, Pauling, I'm not sure what happened to his game last year. I know his production dipped quite a bit. I think he played a few less games too after a big 2023. But just adding both those guys, Fields and Pauling, a lot of experience there, solid production. Ty Washington, speaking of tight end, is he just going to be depth? Is that all?
He's a wild card of sorts. He certainly flashed a lot. He's got some athleticism from Arkansas. Mike Denbrock, the offensive coordinator, was telling us that, like, he recruited him back when Denbrock worked at Cincinnati, and then tried to get him to LSU. And then he joked that like, he joked that he told Washington, like, I've been trying to get you for 7 years, so I'm going to be on you during summer workouts and all that good stuff. But so I'd expect him to contribute as a depth option. But he's an interesting one because he's got 2 years of eligibility left. So he's a bit of a raw athletic tight end option that might not make a huge impact this year, but might put himself in a position to do so next year.
And then on defense, Devonta Smith and Jalen Stroman look like the top gets here. Smith had his best year last year, 30 tackles, played in 12 games, 5 pass breakups. And Stroman, 4 years of production or 4 years of experience. Injured last year, though, and was expecting a big year after the previous 2 years when he had 98 combined tackles. So what was the deal there with Stroman last year?
Yeah, Stroman had a collarbone injury in week 1 with Virginia Tech. It actually didn't heal properly, I think. So he wound up having a little cleanup procedure on that and missed spring practice. And while he did the two younger guys, a guy named Luke Talich, Jr., and a sophomore named Tay Johnson, had a really good spring. So Stroman will not be handed that starting safety job. He'll have to compete for it. But obviously he's a good player who I think might have been on some NFL radars if he had stayed healthy last year. And then Smith, we joke on the Notre Dame beat about that, maybe like endowing the grad transfer nickel position, because it's their third straight year of doing this, and they've been really successful the last couple of years with Thomas Harper from Oklahoma State, and then Jordan Clark was phenomenal last year from Arizona State. So Smith probably has the most raw talent out of those 3. I think he's the biggest. He's pretty big for a nickel. He's got a lot of athleticism and physicality to him. So I think they're really excited about his addition.
Okay. And the only other guys I noticed here that stick out are Jared Dawson and Elijah Hughes, the defensive tackles. Last year, Dawson in 10 games had 4 sacks, which is not bad. Is he just going to be counted on to add some depth on the rotation?
I'm a big fan of Dawson. I think he's got a good shot to start. Like, you see him, you see him in the spring game, like he was in the backfield all the time. Like, I love his style of play. I kind of just like, all out every snap, high motor guy. He's gonna, like I said, just really, really high motor. He's the kind of guy who, like, at his size and with his play style, you probably want him playing 30 snaps a game and not 50, because he's like again he's at his best when he goes 110%. Might not be able to sustain that for 50 snaps. He was like a 30-40 snaps a game guy at Louisville. I suspect for that reason, but I think he's got a good shot to start make a huge impact in those snaps at Notre Dame.
Okay, let's talk about the freshman class now of 2025, and just taking a look at rivals because it's a lot easier for me to navigate, and they're not bad. So rivals, they were again, I believe, 11th, and what stood out for their class, they had just one 5-star, but hey, that's fine. 16 4-stars, and and this is no surprise. You see here that 3 of those players out of the 17 were offensive linemen, including 5-star Will Black.
Mm-hmm.
And what's also interesting is that out of the 17, 4 came from Connecticut. Black came from Connecticut. 3 came from Greenwich, including quarterback Blake Hebert. So I'm not sure what the pipeline is there with Greenwich, but it certainly is working. So talk about the draft class, starting with Will Black.
Yeah, Will Black is supposed to be really, really good, super athletic, true left tackle. In another year, I would say he would have a shot to contribute, but they just have so much depth at offensive tackle that barring injury, which I mean would have said barring injury about Leonard Moore last year, but an injury happens, a redshirt and transfer happens, and all of a sudden he's the best cornerback in college football. So you never know, but I'd say barring injury, Will Black is probably going to have to wait until sophomore year to make a real on-field impact, which of course is never the end of the world with offensive linemen. Other freshmen to watch, the 2 that everyone was talking about in spring practice were Elijah Burris, the wide receiver. Notre Dame does very well with sons of NFL players. That is Plaxico Burris' son. He really stood out in spring practice. Was a bit of a late riser in the recruiting process. Really started to get buzz in that winter before his senior year, and that's when he committed to Notre Dame. So he's a guy who, like, when you talk to defensive backs on the team and you ask them like which receivers are standing out, they always said Elijah Burris, just for his route running, his kind of advanced nature and that sort of thing. So he's a guy who's going to compete for playing time. They have some depth cornerback spots open. 2 of them, Mark Zachary and Dallas Golden, supposed to be really good, but they enrolled in the summer. The one guy who enrolled in the spring was Cree Thomas. From Phoenix, actually went to the same high school as Benjamin Morrison. And Christian Gray, who's obviously one of the incumbent starting quarterbacks, said he's, quote, BMO 2.0. And Christian Gray was like, yeah, he's going to be better than me and Leonard Moore, which the last time Notre Dame cornerback said that about their freshman teammate, it was Benjamin Morrison saying Leonard Moore is going to be better than I am at Notre Dame in fall camp of last year. And I didn't think he'd be right. Certainly, I didn't think he'd be right in year 1, but I mean he was. So when Mike Mickens, the defensive backs coach who coached cornerbacks for a long time, brings in a guy and really likes him right away, you pay attention, and that's been going on with Cree Thomas. The third guy to watch, I would say, is James Flanagan, the freshman. He has the best opportunity for playing time because, like I said, the tight end depth chart is unproven at best and thin at worst, I would say. So Flanagan, he's a guy, was a track athlete as a 240-pound tight end in high school, really high profile hockey player too, growing up in the Green Bay area. The son of Jim Flanagan, who I don't quote me on this, but I think was on Notre Dame's last title team. Definitely played at Notre Dame. I know that for sure. But he's a freak athlete and someone who I think is going to play snaps off the bench this year.
So the top 3 freshmen, besides Will Black, you're saying are Burris, Thomas, and Flanagan.
Those are the 3 guys I think have a good shot. Madden Framo is another one who's a really good athlete and I think could play the run very well right away. He might need a little bit more seasoning in coverage from what I saw in the spring, but he's another guy who has a chance to break into that rotation.
Okay. By the way, this is you mentioned Burris being Plaxico's son. Mm-hmm. Is this a relation here at wide receiver? Jerome Bettis Jr.?
That very much is, yeah. Wow. Very much is.
In the same class too.
Yeah. Okay. They had Ivan Taylor, Ike's son, committed for a while, but he flipped to Michigan and later Alabama.
Okay, interesting. Wow. You're getting old and you start hearing about this.
Yeah, seriously. Well, you know who's committing later this week? Devin Fitzgerald.
Wow.
And all the predictions have him at
Already?
yeah.
Okay. How's the 26 class looking? Or have you heard much about it? Has
Oh,
Kyle
I
given
mean,
you tips?
it's number 3 in the country right now. They've been
Wow.
on a huge run. They have here's another one. Thomas Davis Jr. He was one of their first commitments at linebacker. Uh, so they're doing tremendously well there. They got a Joey O'Brien, who's like a 6'4" safety, who's supposed to be a freak. I think one of On3's scouts, Cody Belair, said like he's the best 7-on-7 player he's ever seen. So a lot of promising talent there.
Okay. And talk about the quarterback. Hebert is just another talented quarterback thrown into the mix.
It was tough for him to like really get reps during a spring practice because they were running a 3-man competition. But they tried to get him work when they could. They flipped him from Clemson late in the cycle after their guy Deuce Knight flipped to Auburn. So he's a redshirt. We'll see down the line.
Okay. Now, this is now the more central related to 2025 than anything else besides the coaching we talked about, and that is give me some players to watch, some breakout performers, holdover guys from the team starting on offense. And because you basically have already said that the Carr and Minchie, that's obviously going to be pretty big. We're going to find out more about that during camp. And you said it's going to be closer than people think, but Carr is definitely the one that people expect to win the job. He's got the most talent. And is he more of a pro style guy?
Yeah, he's a pocket passer. He is as good as I've seen. I haven't been on Notre Dame beat very long, but he's as good as I've seen a Notre Dame quarterback at throwing guys open. Like he had a couple throws to tight ends covered by Adon Schuler, who's their best safety. Pretty good coverage by Schuler, but Carr just throws it in the perfect spot for 15, 20 yard gains. And when you see that, you're like, oh, we're not used to seeing that out of a Notre Dame quarterback. So
Okay.
I think Carr, that was a Riley Leonard weakness last year. Leonard did a lot of great things. He got them to the national championship. Riley Leonard wasn't throwing the ball unless someone was wide open.
Sure.
But Carr will look to hit those tight windows, and he's very accurate when he does. He's got pocket presence, which I firmly believe is something that you can't teach. You either have pocket poise and presence or you don't. And Carr very much has it. He's a natural leader too, which really helps.
Not that it matters, but was he a 4 or a 5?
He was a 4, pretty high 4. So talk about family connections. This is Lloyd Carr's grandson.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Which led to the crazy event of Lloyd Carr and Jim Tressel sitting next to each other wearing Notre Dame gear at the Notre Dame spring game last year. Because
sure.
Of course, Tressel coached Marcus Freeman at Ohio State, still a very close mentor. So all sorts of crazy, if you lived in the 90s or even 2000s, you would this things about Freeman's program at Notre Dame. But so yeah, Carr and Carr Minchie, whoever wins the quarterback competition, obviously breakout candidate. Others on offense, I'm going to point to two on each side of the ball. Charles Jagasaw, the right guard, is someone they are really excited about. They think so. They're playing him at right guard in part because he was so good in that Orange Bowl performance against Penn State. Also in part because they determined that was the best way to get their best 5 offensive linemen on the field. Kind of optimize the best 5. Like Freeman said, Charles Jagasaw can be tackle, guard, center. Like he's really freaking good. That's a direct quote, by the way. He's really freaking good from the head coach. Mike Denbrock, the offensive coordinator, of course, he was at LSU for a couple of years. He actually compared Jagasaw to Will Campbell, both because of their physical ability and the way that they don't make the same mistake twice and they can adjust on the fly. Jagasaw, he's like 6'7", 330 pounds, really, really intelligent player. Very much a butt kicker up front. Like he's out to finish blocks and pancake you. Technically sound too. He's a guy who if he stays healthy, and his career arc is incredible to this point because he started 2 games and it was the Sun Bowl after Joe Alt opted out at left tackle, and then the national championship a year later. So just one of the many crazy things about Notre Dame football in the past couple of years. But he's a guy who they think is going to be a superstar at right guard and possibly one of the best players in the country.
So do they in the pros, do you think that's still going to be his position, or do you think he'll be a tackle prospect in the pros?
He could play guard or tackle.
Okay.
I think it's just a matter of personal preference at this point.
Okay.
But I mean, it's really hard. Personally speaking, it is really hard to get his Orange Bowl performance out of your head because he came in completely cold, had not played offense since fall camp when he tore his pec on August 6th. And honestly, he was a big reason they won that game because when he came in, their run game started really taking off. And of course, their offense scored a lot of points in that second half. So if we're up to me, I'd stick him at guard, but he could very well play tackle too. He's just a really, really good football player.
Okay. Anybody else on offense? And should we stay on the offensive line?
We could. There are certainly a few options there, but I'm going to go to Eli Raridan, the tight end. He's someone who Mike Denbrock, the offensive coordinator, who is also the tight ends coach, has a lot of conviction on right now. He's someone who Notre Dame loved as a recruit, but he came in with a torn ACL from high school, tore his ACL again freshman year, then came back towards the end of sophomore. Actually burned a red shirt his sophomore year, which probably wasn't a great idea. So this is his last year of eligibility, even though he's really only played one full season. He had some quad issue last year in spring practice. So this is even though it's his fourth year at Notre Dame. This was his first healthy spring, which goes to show you like how difficult his time at Notre Dame has been so far. But he very much got better towards the end of last season. During spring practice, you saw him a couple times and you're like, whoa, when's the last time we saw Eli Raridan move like that? And obviously media viewing is extremely limited, but when you talk to Mike Denbrock, he has a lot of conviction that Raridan is going to have a big year. And that of course would do wonders for their offense. First of all, he's got to stay healthy, but if he does, and he has that kind of year like that really completes what they're trying to do offensively.
Okay. And even though we don't have him on this depth chart, and I don't think there's much room for a fifth, Flanagan would be somebody to also just to get some potential reps.
Okay. James Flanagan, I think there's a good chance that he will play. So they have a Flanagan spelled Flanigan. That's the freshman, and Flanagan spelled with an A instead of an I. That's the guy who tore his Achilles.
Okay. Now we all know about Jeremiah Love, so he's an easy one, as well as Price. But do you have anybody else on offense?
I mean, Anthony Knapp, I think, is going to have a big year at left tackle. Started as a true freshman. Jaden Greathouse is going to pick up where he left off in the national championship game. Talking to Marcus Freeman over the offseason, like they viewed his breakout in the Orange Bowl national championship as more Notre Dame figuring Jaden Greathouse out than Greathouse figuring anything out. This is pretty much a direct quote, or at the very least paraphrasing Freeman. Like when we and Riley had to figure out when Jaden Greathouse is covered one-on-one, he's not covered, he's open, throw him the ball. And that's something like I said, not a strength of Riley Leonard is trusting his receivers to make contested catches like that. But he really did in those last two games. And of course it paid off. I'm sure you remember his performance against Penn State and Ohio State. He's someone who they think is going to pick up where he left off. Okay.
Defense. Who's breaking out this year?
So I love Traore. I've always been a huge fan of Traore. He is someone who was probably ahead of schedule. I don't know if they expected him to be as good as he was early last season. As soon as he was, he gained a ton of muscle over the offseason. He always had really good natural pass rushing tools. He can bend the edge with the best of them. I will never forget at fall camp 2023, which is freshman year. He was a summer enrollee. He hit some reserve offensive tackle with a nasty long arm, sent him flying. And I'm like, whoa, he can like the ability to convert speed to power like that. That's not something you see in a true freshman very often. So he's got a ton of pass rushing tools, and he really showed it at the start of last year. He had a couple sacks, a few tackles for loss in his first few games and first two starts after Batella went down. But unfortunately, week 5 against Louisville, he tears his ACL and LCL, loses him for the season. He's back, no setbacks, knock on wood, that we know of. And if he is the same player he was last year, I think this could be his final year at Notre Dame. I think he's that good and that natural. I think if he stayed healthy last year, we would be talking about him in the same light we talk about Jeremiah Love and that, like, oh, he's definitely gone after this year. So again, it is a big if if he picks up where he left off and if he's the same player he was last year. But if that is the case, like I think he's going to have a huge year. On the other side, Bryce Young, sorry about that. Bryce Young, son of Bryant Young, NFL Hall of Famer. It's a 6'7", 260, 270-pound defensive end. Direct quote from Chris Ashton, UDC, like, he has no idea how good he can be. Like, he's got All-American first-round pick upside. Still pretty raw at this point, but a pretty raw Bryce Young is still probably going to be a really good player, so watch out for him. Sorry about that.
Okay.
One more guy on defense.
By the way, Viper. What's the Viper position? Notre Dame? What do they use that for?
That's actually, so the Viper is like their rush end or drop end position, typically a smaller guy. But they're actually, this is something to change on the depth chart. They're doing away with that this year. They're going to do left end and right end. That's probably something I should have mentioned earlier.
So then, basically they're going to be like a standard 4-3.
Yeah, or 4-2-5.
Look, 4-2-5 look. Yeah, okay. So in that, so then in that respect, so then everything though is still okay as far as who's here, because we don't even have that second edge guy anyway, and that should be Traore and Burnham, obviously, and Young will both be getting a lot of time.
Yes, so it would not surprise me because Burnham is a really good run defender. He didn't get enough credit for the way he performed down the stretch last season. Whereas Young has just through the roof pass rush upside. Burnham's got a lot more experience too. I could see Burnham starting the beginning of the season and Young taking over by the end. That's kind of my best guess as to what happened through no fault of Josh Burnham's own, because Bryce Young is just, his upside is crazy. But regardless, both of those guys will play a lot this season.
Okay. And what happens to Osbury then? Where does he go?
He's a rover. Will, like they still use the rover when they go in with base personnel.
He's just an outside linebacker type. That's basically it.
Rover will. I think he's in the right spot.
Are they getting rid of Viper and Rover, or just Viper?
Just Viper.
Viper.
Rover still exists. It's just not as prevalent because they're a primary 4-2-5 team. But like everyone, they'll match personnel.
Got it.
They'll play 4-3 when
okay. So Traore and Young up front. Anybody in the back end? I mean, Leonard Moore, I guess we could put him on the list, even though
he's already broken out.
There's still a lot of, again, keep in mind, there's still a lot of people across the nation that are not as tuned in as you guys at Notre Dame.
So Leonard Moore is a 6'2", probably 200 pounds at this point, cornerback, who has the length and athleticism of future first-round pick, and you really saw it. You saw the potential right away. Everyone at Notre Dame was like, this guy's a star as soon as he enrolled and as soon as he started practicing in fall camp. Wasn't until probably the first round of the CFP where Indiana was like, all right, we love back shoulder throws. Let's just go after the freshman corner. And he rose to the challenge dang near every single time they tried him, with like Elijah Surratt, who's obviously specialized in those back shoulder throws, and Moore just kept blanketing him. And then you're like, holy crap, he's a number one corner right now, which it was really incredible to see. So he's a dude on the back end. Another guy who I think could really break out this year is a Kingston Viliamuasa at linebacker. He'll compete, I think, with Jalen Steen to start at will. He's someone who, like, he can rush the passer, he can drop into coverage, he can he can fit the run, he can block destruct, like he can really do it all. And he's someone who Notre Dame believes is going to be their next like superstar linebacker. Whether that happens this year or next year is to be determined, but I think it's going to happen for him.
And I know last year Kyle had pointed out to Christian Gray, and Christian Gray had a lot of those games, some of the games where he was just like you were saying with Moore, where he's picked on, and he had some bad games, but then he also had some really good games for a pretty young corner. So where does he stand?
He's a locked in starter for sure. He's someone who's obviously, they love his ball skills. They love his attitude. He's got all the confidence in the world. Never really got beaten coverage. Also, like he was tremendous in week 1 against Texas A&M. That probably is still his best game to this point. They didn't really play anyone with a competent passing offense from then until USC.
That's true.
But then USC, like he got picked on until the end of the game where he stepped up and brings back the touchdown and sends them to the playoff, which was obviously an incredible moment. It really speaks to his mindset as a corner of like on to the next play, because he was toasted in that game constantly by like Lemon and Lane. Obviously really good receivers, but they kept going after him, and they did it one too many times, and he made him pay. But he's someone who if he moves on from the national championship, which the play to Jeremiah Smith wasn't really his fault. Like they called an all-out blitz. Ohio State called a 7-man protection, picked it up, and left Gray one-on-one with the best wide receiver in the country.
Yeah, I mean, come on.
Yeah. So no one is covering, blitz doesn't get there, and you have to guard the best wide receiver in the country. No one, Leonard Moore, no one in the world is covering him.
Sure.
In that situation. So that obviously sucked for him, but it wasn't really his fault. But
how about Schuler?
Schuler's a great player who I don't think is getting enough national buzz this season. He plays fast, he's physical, good ball skills, becoming more of a leader on the back end. I like Schuler a lot. He's a guy who, like, they brought in another grad transfer safety last year, Rod Hurd the second from Northwestern, versatile, good player, but he didn't enroll until the summer. And so Schuler got the first team reps in the spring, and you kind of realized when you're watching Schuler back then, like, oh, it's going to be really hard for Rod Hurd to beat him out. And Hurd played a ton. He was a good player, but Schuler really grabbed that starting job and never let it go. And he's their stud. He's their stud on the back end now that Watts is off to the NFL.